My name is Veronica Hannon from Ahlstrom, and we're really pleased to welcome you all. We are waiting for William Tincup, who I hope is going to be joining us quite soon from the USA. He's a real pioneer in the field of user adoption of HR software. We're also really delighted to welcome Lynne from Ahlstrom, who's going to first present a few slides on her story of introducing a SuccessFactors HR system to employees of Ahlstrom based all around the world. We're then going to do something a little bit different. Based on some feedback from previous webinars, we're going to do this as a questions and answer session. So either me or William will be posing some questions to Lynne and then having a discussion about the implementation and adoption of her new HR systems and processes. If there's a burning question that you want addressed, do pop that into the question pane, which you should see on your screen, and we'll try and get to it. After Lynne's presentation, we'll also have some poll questions, which are going to be coming up on your screen to capture your views as we progress through. At the end of the webinar, we'll send out a few survey questions. This is really important for us so that we can continue to provide interesting and relevant content, and it would be really appreciated if you could spare a few minutes to fill it in. There'll also be some conversations on Twitter. To join us, just use the hashtag useradoption, and through that you'll be able to connect to us all. So welcome again, and I'm now going to hand over to Lynne, who's going to be talking us through her project. Lynne, welcome.
Thank you, Ronnie, and welcome to our listeners today. As Ronnie said, I'm going to talk to you about user adoption in Ahlstrom and how we rolled out a software as a service tool. Let me start by sharing with you a bit about the project history and our project objectives. We started the project in 2010, and our target was to have 2,000 of our white-collar employees using a new online performance tool. We had very tight deadlines in which to do this project, and we also had some key project objectives. The first one was to harmonise our performance management process across regions and business areas. With this, Ahlstrom were moving from paper forms to an online format, and this was a huge change, both culturally and in terms of work practices for the company. As part of this project, we were committed to supporting our must-win battle of building high-performance teams and ultimately a high-performance organisation. And to do that, we needed to ensure that we had consistency of goal setting across the whole organisation. A final binding objective of this project was to foster the One Ahlstrom culture right through the company and really building common practices and a common way of working. So these were our project objectives when we set out to do this. If we turn now to look at the challenges, what I would like to do is set this in the context of when we started. We need to look at the bigger picture. We were launching our new online tool in the context of a global recession. As a company, we'd made redundancies. We'd sold one business area, so the business environment, there was uncertainty there, the employees were nervous, and I would actually even go as far to say the employees viewed this new project and the online tool with a certain element of suspicion. I think they were wondering, is this online tool a way for the company to monitor me and my performance? So there was definitely a lot of hesitation when we first kicked off this. And our challenge as the HR function was really to make the employees understand what's in it for me. And we kept that at the forefront of our thinking all the way through this project. Now, in terms of the challenges, I could have gone into great detail and shared many, but I've tried to keep it simple for this webinar. We had the technological challenges, moving from paper forms to online forms. There were challenges around getting the employee engagement and the adoption. There were training need challenges How do the employees do this? How does it work? When do they do it? And we were also faced with the general IT issues anyone associated with rolling out the global tools would come across. You're on this call today probably because you're either going through the same thing now, you've been through it, or you're about to go through it. So we're all coming from a shared background and experiences. Another challenge that Ahlstrom were faced with, where we wanted to move from thinking about the performance ratings in terms of rating the employee, and we were moving to rating the performance. Now that was a culture thing within Ahlstrom, and in the past it had been focused, again because it was these paper forms, it had somehow become the norm that the performance wasn't always being assessed and it was the employee. So we had to work really hard to get that change. A high percentage of our employees were actually being rated above meets expectations, which is the general area that we expect the main part of our workforce to fall into. But we were questioning, how can the employees be rated above meets expectations when as a company we weren't meeting all our targets? So there was a big change management process that we had to go through that in terms of getting people to understand it's rating the performance against the goals. Looking to the second bullet point there, we've actually worked really hard to include now softer skills in our overall performance rating. We've included a values assessment, and this is something which takes place at the year end along with the performance review. And it gives a bit of a balance because the employees are now getting both a performance rating as well as an individual performance rating, how they've actually performed, not just the whole element. So we feel that's very important, and we're very pleased with the work we've done around that. A final challenge that I wanted to share was in terms of the learning process, making the employees understand this new way, very much in terms of the what and understanding the how, the tool. It was a big challenge to get everybody to understand this new way of working. But through the committed efforts of the HR team, regular communication, we've had really good success, and I want to come on to share that with you. Looking now to ways to secure the user adoption. When we started off this project, I was told, I saw it in best practice guidelines, choose your champions wisely. I wish now I'd understood just exactly how important that is. Senior management support is critical from a very early stage, and it must be continuous throughout all your communications. If you can identify a few key champions, that will stand you in excellent stead to really gain your user adoption. To have these senior managers, those in the top management teams, speaking and supporting a project, the value of that in engaging all the employees and cascading the messages right through the organisation, there's real strength in that. Ahlstrom were very lucky because we benefited from having our CEO involved right from the start. That's been a huge help to this project. Top level involvement right from the go, and we've been able to use quotes from our CEO in all our communications plans, and that's been consistent through, which has been very important. And even now, we're fairly established in this online system now. We're still following up. The CEO gives messages at the deadline stages, and it's something the employees almost come to expect because they know how important this is in terms of the overall company strategy and where this fits with that. The importance of timing. This was a lesson learned for our team. Consider your dates very carefully. I think most of us probably have our date that we need to go live from, and then we start working backwards to see it. We had actually decided to launch the forms on December the 20th. We thought if we got them out before the Christmas holiday, that would be great, and everyone could perhaps start a little bit before the Christmas vacation if they wanted to. However, at the 90th minute, we decided to wait and hold off and only issue our executive management, our top tier teams. We gave them the forms on the 20th, but we held off because already many employees had begun their Christmas vacation. So we decided it was much more powerful to hold off and launch these forms 1 week after the return from holiday. Not to launch the week after everybody comes back, actually give people time to come back from the holiday, catch up with the hundreds of emails that will be pending in the inbox, and then relaunch our forms 1 week after. We found this to be a really big success because it gave people time to catch up on their emails, but importantly for us, when the performance forms and when the information and instructions came through to them, it had the clarity, it had the visibility that we wanted it. It wasn't lost in among hundreds of other emails, and that was very powerful for us. In terms of the training and communication, this needs to be ongoing as the software system develops. Really, my advice would be when you're launching software as a service, you've almost got two projects running parallel. One in terms of the software that you're implementing, and then another in terms of the training and how you're going to get your user engagement and user adoption. And these two projects should be running simultaneously, parallel to one another, and really supporting each other, working in a harmonized fashion to bring the whole project together. If you were to wait and decide nearer the go-live date to start doing this, it's going to be too late. What we found in doing this is that we were investing heavily in the technology, financially, in terms of energy, in terms of staff. There was a big investment there. And very much, if you're launching a state-of-the-art and a market-leading tool, you need to have training and support materials that back this up. It needs to be modern, it needs to be engaging, and that's how you can drive your user adoption. We found that in the past, the traditional attendance at a 2-day training seminar, that just isn't working anymore, not in the current business context. People are too busy, there are too many time constraints. The training needs to be delivered just in time on a flexible basis. And since we've changed our approach to training, our employees are able to get the training in this just-in-time fashion, and it's working excellently. Employees have access to training on their mobile phones, on their iPads when they're travelling, and we're having real success with this. Another key learning that can really help to drive your user adoption is it's important to identify the difference between the training the employees need and the training that the managers need. A great way to promote your new software system is to share with the managers the reporting within any features. That's a great function which can really support the management teams right through the business, helping them understand, in the case of the performance management, areas such as development needs, competency analysis and succession planning. And we've had, again, good success by promoting to the managers and sharing through webinars, through lunchtime meetings, how they can use these reports, how it will help them in their working and developing their teams. And we're finding this is a really good way to get the buy-in. Another way, and it can have additional cost implications, but it's really important to do the training wherever possible in local language. As a global company, we are present in over 20 countries, and it's something we've had to consider carefully, both in terms of different styles of learning culturally and the language. Ahlstrom's language is English, that's the company language, but of course if we can provide to our employees local language or native language trainings, the understanding is so much greater, and it also works to further support how committed the company is to this project by being able to offer it in the different languages. I'd now like to talk to you about the engagement. As I mentioned, we started the process back in 2010, and we weren't quite quick enough off the mark in terms of our training. I wouldn't go as far as to say it was an afterthought. We were conscious of it all through the project. However, as a small team working to tight deadlines, all our efforts did go into getting the software configured to the Ahlstrom way of working. The company that we bought the tool from did have generic training, but as we'd configured the tool quite heavily for Ahlstrom use, their generic training wasn't suitable for us to use. So while we had a whole host of very useful information, it didn't fit our business need. We therefore, for the first year of our online tool, made some internal trainings. These were good. They were of a good quality. They were step-by-step guides. We had frequently asked questions, all materials that were good, but they were lengthy and they were time-consuming for the employees to go through. So after one full cycle, we partnered with a training company that helped us to create customized tutorials, and as you can see, the results speak for themselves. We've had fantastic success. Looking to the performance evaluation in 2010, the compliance at the deadline, the date by which we wanted everyone to have completed their forms, we were sitting at 57%. Now this was the first cycle of the process, and we had really expected that to be much higher. So 57% compliance was really disappointing and not at all in line with what the company expected. Since we've gone live with our tutorials, the performance evaluation in 2011, whereby our teams were supported by tutorials, we've seen that rise up to 83.7%. That's a huge increase, and the employees have been really forthcoming with the feedback, letting us know, how much these tutorials have helped them. So we've been really, really impressed by this. Again, looking to the goal setting, 30% up to 65.6%. We've been so impressed. And I've been really pleased because I was part of both projects, and I've had quite many of the employees contacting me, generally from the airport, saying they're watching the tutorials in the airport on their mobiles. And that's great because that's when you've got the time to do this. It's just delivered just in time. So we've been really pleased. Thinking in terms of lessons that I would want to share with someone either starting out on a project or partway through the implementation, hold face-to-face workshops for business area leaders, i.e. your champions. Really good to train them on the tool. As we mentioned earlier, it's not possible now to train everybody, take them all away for a 2-day seminar, but by training some of your key managers or business area leaders, they then cascade the learnings, and that really works well. One thing I would do differently, we focused on our middle group of employees primarily because historically they've been a very challenging group to win over. Traditionally they've been with the company for the longest period of time. They've seen quite many changes already, and they're reluctant for further change. What I would do differently is I would not hold them with kid gloves. I think we almost held them up as knowing there'd be some pushback and resistance to this group. So we made extra efforts to make sure they were fully involved. And actually thinking back in terms of time, we could have saved ourselves quite a lot of time by almost taking a firmer hand with this and just saying, this is how we do it now. This is how it's changed. Since we went live with this project, Ahlstrom have redone their values, our company values, and one of the new values that we must work by is learn and renew. For us in HR, this fits very nicely with the changes that are ongoing just now in HR and that we're driving through the company. And that's very much something that I think if it had happened a bit earlier, we might have spotted that and not spent as much time trying to cajole this middle group through the change. We would have taken a firmer hand and very much be saying, this is the Ahlstrom way of doing it. We learn and renew and we move forward. Lunchtime webinars, we called them Lunch and Learn. We had HR professionals from Ahlstrom supported by a key organisational leader, and these were really good ways to communicate with the employees, the what and the how, to actually show them the online tool, show them any other training materials that we had, even guiding them through our intranet pages which are dedicated to performance management and showing them firsthand where they can go to find the tutorials. We were really surprised with the first call. We had 50 people in the morning and 80 in the afternoon, and we really would probably expected perhaps 20. So it was really good to see people like this offering. They could come in, listen, take away what they needed to get. And of course always having time at the end for questions and answers. Looking to the right hand side of this slide, celebrate the successes, however small. I really encourage you and your teams to do this. Rolling out an HR software system is not a one-time event. and it's not an easy project to go through. There are many challenges along the way, and I know from speaking with other companies and fellow HR professionals, very often we're working in small teams, we have tight budgets, there are time restrictions, so there's many challenges around this, but certainly celebrating the quick wins and the successes, that mustn't be overlooked. It's very important for keeping the motivation of the team high. We need to also remember that these aren't one-time events, and that implementing these, think about it in terms of the long-term value add. Where will your company be in 2, 3, or perhaps 5 years' time? And that's what we have to remember, because we get so caught up in the day-to-day and what's happening now and who's got the access and who's having problems. And these are all the challenges that we've got to deal with. Of course we do, but remember to focus that you're doing this now for the value add in a couple of years to come. I think it's really important to keep that in mind. And as the organisations continue to grow and change, these software systems then become embedded in the culture, and as your user adoption grows, that will keep expanding, and that's where the successes come from. So thank you. I hope that my shared experiences perhaps ring some bells with you, or give you the support or some examples of things to look out for when we're doing this. As I say, many challenges. They're great projects to be part of though, and we must keep the motivation high and remember that we're doing this for the employees, and that's where the value add and the benefit comes from.
That's great. Lynne, thank you so much for taking us through that. We've now been joined by William, so I'm going to hand over to William Tincup now, who's going to talk with Lynne through some of her experiences and some of the many questions that are out there about user adoption. Welcome, William.
Welcome. Thank you very much, Lynne. That was awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your story, obviously. First question I'd like to ask is, what advice would you have for another company choosing to introduce a SaaS HR solution?
Hi, William.
Hey.
Great question, and very valid. A couple of things that I want to cover when I answered that question. Your go-live dates, I touched upon that in my presentation. The go-live dates are really important. You need to know what these are going to be, and then focus your communication plan around that. Make sure the business is ready for the launch. When we were doing our project, we wanted to launch the new online tool with a huge bang. We wanted it to arrive in the company and everyone to be talking about it and getting involved, logging in, and seeing how it works. And that's really important, that you have that appeal to the product when it launches. However, it's really important to make sure the business is ready for the launch. And I think drip feed approach works very nicely in terms of giving small pieces of information regularly. It could be through your intranet, it could be through messages from senior managers, but regular and timely updates work really well. Choose your champions, very important. And also, perhaps the most important one, the training has to be done simultaneously. That can't be an afterthought. The employees need to be engaged to use this new tool. That's what drives the adoption that we seek to have. So yes, I'd sum that up in 3 things: your go-live dates, the communication around that, and the training.
Nice. And y'all, just in case you're looking at your screen, we've got several poll questions that are going to be going on while Lynne and I are having this part of the conversation. So if you can, do us a favor and participate in the poll and listen to Lynne and I go back and forth on our Q&A. Lynne, excuse me. Have you measured, or have you been asked to measure the return on investment of your actions?
We were. I've been with the company for 3.5 years, and there were, not in terms of this project, but there were other projects obviously ongoing prior to that, and I was sometimes told that the investment wasn't always measured. Nowadays, Ahlstrom are following this up much more closely. And we've been asked to justify the return for the investment. So what we're looking at there is in terms of, are the teams more aligned? Are we more focused? And through the reporting, we can very much see the direct impact that this online tool has had in helping all the employees be focused on achieving the overall company strategy. Another change that we introduced after doing this online tool was group HR. That's the HR that work from the head office. We are now involved in supporting much more our regional HR teams. As an example, previously, France is a very big region for us, and our French colleagues, they have an dedicated HR team, but we're now working more closely with the French HR manager to support him and to help him follow up to make sure that everybody meets the deadlines and has the online forms done. I think when we first did this, there was a little bit of pushback in terms of, well, why are we now doing this? This wasn't done before, why does it have to be done now? But in terms of the overall way of working at Ahlstrom, we wanted to promote the support between functions and teams, but also really to show how important this online tool is for the company, and having HR follow up reinforces that message.
Well, fantastic. A question I get asked all the time, and I know that you've thought about this, but now let's put on that your visionary hat, if you will, and if you could go back to the beginning of the project, what would be the one thing or things that you would definitely do differently?
Again, that's a great question, and it's something we've discussed in our team. All the projects of actually getting our online tool live has now closed, and we also have made our tutorials to support and to drive the user adoption. But those projects, if you like, are closed because they've gone live, the tutorials are live, but we still see them as running on. We're still monitoring and following up. And if I could go back to the beginning, I would set up a sub-team or even an individual that would be fully focused on the training and building the training content. As I mentioned in the slide deck, that project would need to run in parallel to the overall SAAS project, but I think that's really important. When we did it, William, we were a small team, and it was something that we were thinking about and discussing, but no one person had the responsibility for ensuring that it happened, and that's definitely something that I would change. Make sure one person, or ideally a team if your budgets and your personnel numbers allow it, but definitely have one person focused on building the training content and really working to make sure that the employees are going to know about this, they'll be engaged, they're going to get involved. That's really important.
Yeah,
Can I flip that back to you? Would you have said a similar thing, or what would you say?
I think training, I would obviously spend more time, money, and energy in training for sure. I'd also spend a little time, money, and energy in communications, because I think that's somewhere else we kind of fall down is we don't prepare the audience, our employees, for the change that's coming. So I think that having some level of communications, I think investing in those types of programmatically, a poster campaign, email, Muppets, whatever it takes, but just how do we communicate the change? And then lastly, what I would do is I would spend a little bit of time, money, and energy in assessing the audience from a learning styles perspective. I'd like to know more about how does my audience like to learn? How do they like to consume content? How do they like to consume training? And so that we can meet them where they are. And some of that is you just have to spend time really trying to figure out how they like to consume content. So that's, this is that question, the hopefully we have no regrets, right? This is also the question of how can we get better the next time, because this won't be the last time that we implement, SaaS software. So hopefully every time we do it, we just get a little bit wiser and a little bit smarter. Okay, so our next question is a fantastic question. How well did board members, C-suite if you will, understand the likely impact of the solution?
We were actually very lucky. I mentioned earlier we had CEO buy-in right from the start. So we were supported, we were able to use messages from them in our communications, and that worked very well. I have got colleagues that have done similar projects, and they've not had quite the same level of support from either CEO or senior management teams, and they had real difficulties around almost getting the project off the ground, if you like, because it was seen to be something that was coming from HR rather than from the business. So we were certainly lucky in that we had board members, CEO, our executive management team all supporting this. But I'm not sure, you know, if you were faced with a company that were perhaps not as well supported by the executive team as you wanted, how could someone deal with that?
Well, it's been my experience, Lynne, that technology implementations fail over the course of time that are the relationship between the C-suite and their implementation. I'll give you for instance, that's outside of our world. The CRM play, Salesforce.com, years ago, Salesforce would be great. Like if you're a sales leader and you wanted to roll out 100 license to your sales team, etc., you'd get about a moderate success. Some people would take it, some people wouldn't. Typical bell curve. What Salesforce learned is that when the CEO, CFO, and anybody else at the C-suite, when they're behind the rollout, they have 100% implementation, because what it is it's not just the time and money and things like that, but it's ultimately a way that they would run their business. People use Salesforce now as a forecasting tool. They use it for sales management, contact management, follow-up, and also some tangential marketing things, but they really use it to forecast their business. How are we going to be doing a year from now based on what we know in our pipeline now, which affects everybody. So I think the same is said in a lot of the HR software rollouts. When it's just used as a kind of a dumb database, the C-suite's not involved and doesn't feel like it needs to be involved. Some of those implementations go well and some of them don't. But a lot of these plays, a lot of the software like SuccessFactors or Taleo, they're now starting to be seen as business critical software. And as they're seen as business critical software, the C-suite is paying attention to that, not only because of the expenditure, but they're paying attention to that because they're going to need data from those applications. So as they care, the more they're pushing that throughout the entire audience of, hey, we're making significant investment in this. We really care about the data that comes out of this because we're going to be making business decisions from it. And shockingly enough, implementations go a little bit more smoothly, and it's been communicated throughout the organizations that we care about these. So I think it's critical to have a successful rollout. I think it's absolutely critical to have the C-suite on board and to have them as your advocates for the rollout. Well, Lynne, let's switch gears. I got another question I'd love to ask you. How did you provide training in a way that fits with differing cultures within your organization?
Good question. Well, we didn't do a survey or anything like you mentioned a moment ago, and that's definitely something I would take on board and consider to do again. We're a global company, so we are very aware of different cultures, different learning styles, and the one size doesn't fit all, of course. We did offer lunch and learn sessions, lunchtime webinars, also lunchtime drop-ins. Employees could come to meeting rooms, boardrooms, and there would be an HR professional waiting there to either go through quite a structured review of how to use the tool, or just to do a Q&A face-to-face. We had to work quite hard to get our regional HR teams to do that. There was a heavy time investment in making people aware to give that training, but that certainly did work well. We also, at a group level, created a host of training materials, and then cascaded these again to the regional teams and had them translated into local language. But without doubt, the biggest success for us came from our tutorials. They're short, they're about 4-minute tutorials. They can be delivered in a host of languages, and the employees, I mentioned before, they can watch them. They can be embedded directly into the performance forms, so the employees can watch about goal setting at the goal setting stage. Equally, I mentioned they can watch them in the airports and things. So really, we wanted to offer a wide variety. You know, if somebody likes to go through a really detailed guide of how to do it, what not to do, we've prepared that. But equally, we've got really short, snappy, to the point, just-in-time trainings also available.
You know, for me, this is, you want to meet your audience where they are. And that's where, if we do this in a perfect world, what we do is we learn about our audience. We learn how they like to learn, how they like to consume learning, and how they consume training. That's what we want to know in the future. We want to know all these things, so we got a mishmash of a group of people out there that they all have different learning styles, they all have different learning preferences or learning differences, if you will. And then our job is then to put content together in many forms and across many mediums to reach many different types of learners. Because really what we care about is the uptick of them learning what they're supposed to learn and then using the technology to its max. So if you think of this as kind of a many-to-many approach, where we have many different forms of content, training content, and going to many types of people that like to learn. So I think for anyone that's designing programs for training, the old model of we created it one way, we shot it out to all of the group, and they all took it and ran with it. We're way past that now. And some people like to learn on their phone. Some people like to learn on their tablet. Some people like to learn sitting in front of their TV or their monitor. Some people like to learn in seminar. Some people like to watch videos nonstop about the training of the software. No judgment. I would never say which one's right or wrong. The point is, we need to know what they want to consume, because for us, it's a game of consumption and usage and ultimately adoption that unlocks the business value of the software that we're spending money on. And that's all what we care about, because the department's spending a lot of money on this software. We care that they use it. And in order for them to consume it and use it, they have to be trained. And what I'm suggesting is, let's meet them where they are, wherever that is. You want all of the white paper content on your iPad? Fantastic. Great. You want to consume that because you got a 2-hour train ride every day? Great. Love it. Read that content. All I care about is that we meet them where they are, which assumes that we know where they are. And then we fulfill on that. We give them training, fantastic training in real time that they want to consume. All right. Let's ask.
Can I add one more point on that?
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Right, a thought in my head there. With our training tutorials that we have, we can get reporting as to the number of hits and who's viewed and who's not viewed. So we're also able to use that information to go back to people and perhaps say to them, were you aware this training feature is available? You can watch this, or you can have white papers on it or PowerPoint presentations on it. When you're talking about, almost surveying your audience to see how they like to learn, how would you do that? Would you actually do that in a survey format? We have a few internal tools that we can use to build surveys. Is that what you mean, or do you have any other ideas of how I should actually further determine the best ways to train the different audiences?
Well, there's two ways. What I would say is you can assess for it. There's actually assessment tools, off-the-shelf assessment tools by SHL and Hogan and Connexa, a couple other assessment companies. They already have kind kind of assessments around learning styles. So what you're looking for there is like, how do people like to learn? And so it's a battery of questions that are already kind of built for you, if you will, that really tell you exactly how they like to learn. So that's the assessment world. There's some off-the-shelf products that are really good there. And if we can't go that route, then yes, just a simple survey. You know, listen, we on the training side, and so we can train you any way you want to be trained. You know, in the U.S. we call that the Burger King model, because they have a mantra of "have it your way," which I'm not sure is good or bad, but I'll just stick to it because it's definitely American. And the whole idea there behind that shtick that they have is that we're not going to tell you how you like your hamburger. You tell us how you want your hamburger. You want pickles? Great. You pickles. You want pickles and onions? Fantastic. Pickles, onions, and mustard? Fantastic. Again, you tell us, you drive, employee, you drive, tell us how you would like to be trained. It's radically different than the model of training in the last 20 years where we sat everybody into a room for a 2-day seminar and talked at them. And some of those people got it, and I believe the vast majority of them went back to their cube or went back to their office getting a little bit of what they were supposed to out of that training. If for no other reason than their learning differences got in the way. They sat too far from the screen, they couldn't see. They really would like to have had a piece of paper in front of them, they would rather have one-on-one training. Whatever those things are, what I suggest, and I really think it's just something we should all do, is how do we know more about them and how they like to learn, and then just model ourselves around how they like to learn. So, Lynn, yeah, I would do, if it were me, I would do an off-the-shelf assessment and a survey. So I would assess for it, find out more details about their learning styles, and then I would also then ask them some probative questions about that stuff.
And that would really help with the engagement because they're going to see how committed we are to actually helping them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
They were a part of it. They were a part of deciding how they wanted to be trained, and it's in a larger. We meet them where they are. And if we meet them where they are, we get the uptick. And if that's in Portuguese, we meet them where they are. If it's on their iPad, we meet them where they are. If it's 24/7, video that's delivered inside the software that they use, we meet them where they are. Our job is to meet them where they are. So we have to find out where they are in order to then fulfill on that brand promise. Let me ask you the next question, which is a fantastic question, and I know the audience is riddled with this question because I am. How did you determine your budget for training?
Yeah, again, that's a question that we discussed in great detail in our teams. We had heavily invested in the software already. That was a big investment for Ahlstrom, and of course an ongoing investment because it's online. We have license fees and annual subscription fees. But we knew we needed the training to fit with this high-end product. So therefore there was no, or for us, there was no way we were going to launch this market-leading tool and then with just some mediocre training. We had to have the balance between the two to really show how committed the organisation was to this. So for us, it was about almost a marriage, if you like, between getting the blend. I suppose the blend's a good word to use here. We wanted the blend between the excellent product and the excellent training that we could offer so that employees could really see that this was the new way of doing things.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that I think, and I'm not going to make a lot of friends, in the software world, but I think we pay too much for software, and I think that we pay too less. We invest too little in change management, training, and communications. So if you know, it's been in my head rumbling around for a little while that let's say we pay, you know, $40 per employee per month for the software, or some number, whatever that is. I think that model should be more like $10 per month per employee to the software, but what we should be doing with that other $30 per month is we should be spending that in change management, training, and also communications. Like, we're spending like the budget as our, if you look at the totality of our budget, it's occupied with a lot of huge software expenditures, which I get it, software is expensive, I'm not trying to degrade that, but we're spending the vast majority on software, and people have to use software. We haven't figured out a model where we invest enough in time, money, and energy in getting people to use the software. It's like the software budget is so high that we have no more budget left over to actually do the training and or communications and or change management. So I think the model is broken. And so then what it leaves is it leaves all of our HR pros and training pros to then try to scrap together some sort of training budget, and that's just not the way we should be going about this. So anyhow, I digress. I've got some issues there, but I believe that our budgets should be already baked in. They should be a part of kind of the software cost, and so that we shouldn't have to quote unquote fight for budget. So if anyone has a good model for that, I'd love for you to share with me, because that's something I'd like to change. All right, let's talk about it.
Having been through this process once, it's definitely something that as an HR department now, we're much more aware of. Anything that we're looking to do that's similar to this, we're very much thinking, okay, well, we need to have this product. How do we bring it to our audience? How do we bring it to the employees?
Nice. Well, that's a nice segue. Obviously, things change. How do you convey that message to employees? Like, what communication methods do you use to inform your employees of change?
I think to date we've actually been using quite traditional methods. We've been doing it on the company intranet. We've been holding site meetings, office meetings, and the senior managers would go through what the change was, what it involves, who it impacts. We have a company magazine, we would communicate it through there. So generally we tend to do quite traditional communications. Since the start of this year, actually, we've taken into use a lot of webinars to communicate changes. We've had about 15 to date, talking about new projects, everything from project management office through to life cycle assessment and how that impacts on Ahlstrom. So the webinars are a new, slightly informal way of doing it, but it's still bringing the needed messages across. And we're also using quite a lot of e-newsletters just now. Actually, through our performance system, we have what we call our master data. So we have a list of everybody that's active in the company, and we're very easily able to target specific groups, managers of 10 or more people, small teams, specific teams, and we're creating e-newsletters to give them the communication and the messages that they need. What I think we would like to do going forward is become much more modern in terms of the way that we communicate, social collaboration, these sort of ways.
Nice. Did you find a resistance to change, and if so, how did this manifest itself, and what did you do to overcome it?
Yeah, we had some resistance, perhaps not as much as we'd feared, which was good. But and this is the truth, I had one guy phone me. He hadn't done his form. I'd sent an email, I'd followed up on it, and he phoned me. And he said, "What's the point?" He said, "You're going to change this next year." And I think he probably spoke on behalf of a small minority that actually believed that, they felt things were changing so rapidly in the company and all the time that what was the point in him getting on board with this, because it was only going to change again. Now we had a long and fairly heated conversation, and I made it really clear to him that actually this was the new way of working. This is how we do it in Ahlstrom, and that the expectation by both Group HR and going as high as the executive management team is that all the employees in Ahlstrom that are white collar use this online tool to monitor performance and to set the goal setting. So yeah, we did have some pushback. I guess everyone's going to come across it to some extent, but I think it's how you handle it. We had recently our new values, the company values, and one of them was this learn and renew. Learn and renew, and we're using that a lot in our communications just now, really to drive the message through to people that as a company, that is exactly what we need to do. We need to keep moving, we need to keep changing, we need to be ready. We're committed to being a high-performing organisation, and to do that, we need to be not just ready for the change, but ready to embrace the change and move with the new things that are happening. And we've had quite a lot of changes at the top level in the company over the last few years, and I think our new managers are being excellent at really driving this message through the company.
Fantastic. We've got about 5 minutes left for questions, and I want to get to 2 at least. And one of them is from our audience. Actually, this question is from Louise. How do employees complete the appraisal? Do they meet and fill in the system, or do they sit around the PC? So how do they fill out the appraisal?
Yes. We've actually left this open, Louise. The employees can, of course, sit around the table and do it, or they can do it remotely. As best practice, we encourage people to have the discussions with the laptops closed. If you imagine that you're sitting at the desk speaking with your manager and you've both got your laptops open looking at the form, it does create a slight barrier between you for having an open, honest and frank discussion. So ideally, I think they should be doing their preparation before coming to the face-to-face meeting or the video conference meeting, being prepared, knowing what to discuss, discussing it, and then going away and adding the information and updating the form that way, and then it gets sent back to the manager. That's a prepared way of working, and that's certainly how we encourage people in Ahlstrom to do it.
Fantastic. All right, Lynn, the last question from me. How has an increase in user adoption affected your role within HR?
Well, from a selfish standpoint, it's simplified my role. It's been a huge support to my role, and not just to me, but to the team that I work with. You know, following up on the compliance deadlines, who's hit the targets, who's not, that in itself can become a full-time job, just following up, working with your global partners to make sure everybody's doing the right things at the right time. So now, because of our increased adoption, you know, you saw it there, the figures are as high as 80% and 60%. We've got much better compliance, and that means that my time doesn't need to be spent chasing up people, and I can be more focused on giving the help where it's needed, and on the training side. So it's simplified my role, but it's also, it's been very rewarding to see that others actually now understand, you know, they get what's in it for me in terms of this tool. Because yes, the tool does give HR and the company excellent reporting, excellent visibility into the competency, into succession planning, into the overall strategy of the company and how the goals are aligned to it. But really, in terms of an individual, I honestly believe that the tool is really important for giving people a sense of responsibility. They've got their goals, they know how they fit with the big picture and the strategy. So for me, the increase in the user adoption has been rewarding, because I feel as though that's the acknowledgement that the employees are saying, yeah, you know, this works, this is good.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. We have one very quick question that has just come in from Sophie, who just wanted to find out whether all of your employees have online access.
Yes, they do, although we can also offer offline forms, which we may do for our blue collars, but they do all have online access.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, William. Thank you, Lynn, for your time today, and also to everybody for joining. It's just coming up to 2 o'clock, so I think we will call it a day. We do have another webinar going on tonight, so if you've got colleagues over in North America and Canada, it's happening this evening, and you can pass on the details to them, all available on the Ahlstrom website, which is www.ahlstrom.tv. When we switch off as well, as I mentioned at the top, there'll be a couple of survey questions that come through to you. So please, if you could fill that in, that would be really appreciated. So remember, Twitter hashtag user adoption, that you can connect to all of us. I would just like to say thank you once again to William Tincup and Lynne Anderson from Ahlstrom, and to all of you for joining us. That's it.